When the desert took my water, my hope, and almost my life, I thought I was dying alone until they emerged from the dust storm, the sand hunters, and I realized that to survive is to become their prey. The last drop of water had evaporated from my cracked lips hours ago. The sun, a malevolent orange orb in the perpetual haze, beat down with the weight of a dying god. My ship, the Pilgrim's Folly Dash, was a twisted monument of scorched metal and shattered dreams, half buried in the colossal dunes behind me. Crash landing on Xylos 4 was a death sentence, and I was serving it, slowly, agonizingly, one dehydrating cell at a time. My name is Kalen, or it was. Names felt meaningless now. Just a human husk, barely crawling across an ocean of endless sand. Every breath was a rasp, every movement a volcanic eruption of pain. My internal monologue, once a torrent of strategic calculations and frustrated curses, had dwindled to primal whispers. Water. Shade. Survive. My augmented leg, usually a marvel of biomechanics, was seizing, its internal fluid cooked. My vision blurred, heat haze dancing on the horizon, turning the distant dunes into shimmering mirages. This is it, a grim, resigned voice whispered in my mind. The end of the line. Just another piece of refuse for the desert to claim. My hope, that last stubborn ember, was fading, succumbing to the furnace of this alien sun. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure the image of a cool, clear river, of green trees, of anything that wasn't this desolate, burning hell. Then, a vibration. Not the rumbling of my stomach, nor the tremor of my failing body. A deep, rhythmic thrumming in the sand, growing steadily, powerfully. My eyes, crusted with salt and grit, forced themselves open. Through the shimmering heat haze, a cloud of dust was approaching. Not a sandstorm. Too localized. Too purposeful. As it drew closer, shapes began to coalesce within the dust. Not vehicles, but figures. Moving with impossible speed and grace, almost skimming the surface of the dunes. Humanoid, but taller, leaner than any man I'd ever seen. My heart, a dry, withered thing, gave a desperate flutter. Rescuers? Or something worse? On a planet like Xylos 4, worse was the more probable outcome. They emerged from the dust like spectral beings, materializing out of the shimmering air. There were 5 of them, all women, and they were magnificent. Their skin was sun-baked, several shades darker than any human, a rich, earthy bronze that seemed to absorb the harsh light without blemish. Subtle, intricate tribal markings, geometric patterns in ochre and black, adorned their faces and limbs, hinting at a culture as ancient and unyielding as the desert itself. Their eyes were piercing, a startling amber or jade, protected by enhanced nictitating membranes that flickered almost imperceptibly, shedding sand and glare with an unnerving efficiency. Their hair, a wild cascade of dark, braided strands, was adorned with bone and scavenged metal. They wore practical, weathered armor woven from leathery hides and reinforced with gleaming scavenged plating, allowing for maximum agility. Their weapons were not energy rifles, but long, curved blades and barbed spears, clearly designed for close-quarters combat against creatures of this harsh land. They moved with an almost animalistic grace, their muscles lean, powerful, honed by constant survival. They were the embodiment of primal strength, of fierce resilience. The heat, the sand, the brutal environment, it seemed to roll off them, leaving them untouched. The leader, taller than the rest, her face a mask of fierce intelligence, stopped directly before me. Her eyes, a predatory amber, assessed me with an unnerving intensity. Her skin, even darker than the others, seemed to ripple with a subtle, almost imperceptible scaling beneath the tribal marks. She radiated an aura of quiet authority, of absolute command. My internal monologue, shocked from its stupor of dying, snapped to alert. Sand Huntresses. The legends are true. They exist. Whispers on the fringe world spoke of these women, desert nomads, masters of Xylos 4's wastes. They were not known for their mercy. What is this? Her voice was a low growl, raw and guttural, like sand grinding against rock. Not a question, but a demand. Her gaze swept over my broken body, my tattered uniform, the wreckage of my ship in the distance. She saw my weakness. She saw my vulnerability. Another woman, lean and quick, with piercing jade eyes and a lighter, more agile build, crouched beside me. Her hands, calloused and strong, deftly checked my pulse, my breathing. Her touch was rough, yet efficient. This was likely the scout or the healer, I instinctively judged. Male, the scout reported, her voice a low, almost contemptuous murmur. Weak, dehydrated, dying. He came from the Sky Metal, another woman, broader, more powerfully built, with a heavy, two-handed axe strapped to her back, rumbled. Her eyes, a stormy gray, held a primal suspicion. The metal beast crashed. He brings ruin. A fourth, her face partially obscured by a woven hood, her movements subtle and watchful, added, her voice a low hiss. The leader's amber eyes narrowed, fixed on mine. You violate our lands, Skydweller. You bring wreckage and weakness. Her words were sparse, direct, yet imbued with a commanding power that bypassed my failing consciousness, drilling straight into my survival instinct. My throat was too dry to speak. I could only meet her gaze, a desperate, unspoken plea for something. Mercy, perhaps, or simply understanding. She knelt, her eyes level with mine. The sin of her, wild, musky, like dry earth and something undefinably primal, filled my senses. The raw power emanating from her was intoxicating, terrifying. This wasn't physical allure in the conventional sense. It was the dangerous attraction to unyielding strength, to a savage freedom I had never known. You have nothing, she stated, a chilling observation. No water, no strength. You were already claimed by the sand. My vision blurred again. My body was giving out. I was on the brink, dangling by a thread over the abyss of unconsciousness. Then, a sudden, searing pain. The scout, with unnerving speed, jabbed a small, barbed needle into my neck. I gasped, a strangled sound. A burning cold spread through my veins, pushing back the encroaching darkness. My muscles twitched, then relaxed. My mind, though still reeling, felt a sudden, brutal clarity. Not a sedative. Something to keep me alive. To keep me awake. We do not leave useful things to die, the leader said, her voice a low, guttural murmur. Not when they can serve. You live, Skydweller. But your life is ours now. She rose, her imposing figure silhouetted against the burning sun. Take him. To the Denver. Strong, calloused hands, surprisingly gentle yet utterly firm, lifted my broken body from the searing sand. The sin of their wildness, their raw power, filled my senses as they carried me. My last conscious thought was a chilling realization. I had been saved from death. Yes, but I hadn't been rescued. I had been claimed. I was their prey, their possession. And my survival, my very existence, depended on navigating their fierce, unpredictable world. The brutal realities of Xylos, and the dangerous attraction to these women who were simultaneously my saviors, my potential masters, and the embodiment of a primal strength, had just begun to unfold. #### The Sand Huntresses, Part 1. The Claim. The journey to their den was a blur of excruciating pain and fleeting consciousness. I was slung across the back of some beast, a two-legged reptilian creature with leathery hide and powerful strides that jarred every bone in my broken body. The heat remained relentless, but the dry wind, whipped up by our speed, offered a semblance of relief from the sun's direct assault. My internal monologue was a fractured symphony of primal urges. Hold on. Don't die. Observe. Learn. The Sand Huntresses moved like a single, cohesive entity around me. Their rhythm was the desert's rhythm, fluid, efficient, utterly adapted. They spoke in sparse, guttural clicks and low growls, a language as harsh and ancient as the land itself. I, Kalen, the tech-savvy stardrifter, understood nothing. I was a newborn, raw and helpless, in a world where every rustle of sand could mean death. We eventually descended into a vast canyon, its walls etched by eons of wind and sand into grotesque, organic shapes. The air grew cooler, heavier, hinting at the presence of moisture. My parched throat ached with anticipation. The Denver. It wasn't a structure in the traditional sense, but a colossal network of caves and interconnected tunnels, carved deep into the canyon walls. The entrance was a natural archway, guarded by two more huntresses, their spears glinting in the faint light. They acknowledged the leader with a silent, respectful nod. Inside, the air was cool, damp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth, dried herbs, and something else, something wild, animalistic, yet strangely comforting. The darkness was absolute in places, broken only by the flickering glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the cave walls, or the occasional light from a tribal lamp crafted from bone and glowing crystals. They carried me deeper, through winding passages, past crude but functional living spaces carved into the rock. Other huntresses, older, younger, their faces etched with the same resilience, glanced at me with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and indifference. My status as an outsider, a specimen, was clear. I was brought to a small, isolated chamber, carved deep within the Denver. The floor was covered with coarse-woven mats. A small, glowing pool of water, impossibly clear, shimmered in the corner. My eyes fixed on it, a desperate, animalistic yearning. The leader, whose name I still didn't know, knelt beside me. Her amber eyes, so intense, studied me. Her hand, calloused but gentle, pressed a crude, damp cloth to my lips. Water. Pure, cool, life-giving water. I gulped greedily, my body convulsing, tears stinging my eyes. It was the most exquisite sensation I had ever known. Slowly, her voice, a low rumble, commanded. The desert takes. The desert gives. But the gift is earned. The scout, the one who had injected me, approached with a bowl of thick, nutrient-rich paste. Eat, she ordered, her jade eyes unwavering. Strength comes from within, and from what you take. I tried to refuse. My stomach was in knots, revolted by the rich, earthy smell. But their gaze was unyielding, their demand absolute. I ate, forcing down mouthfuls of the gritty, tasteless paste. It felt like consumption, a further act of my assimilation into their world. My initial arrogance, my human pride, had withered under the sun. Now, only survival mattered. Over the next few days, or what I perceived as days in the timeless gloom of the den, my initiation began. I was nursed back from the brink, fed the strange paste, given small sips of their precious water. My augmented leg, miraculously, began to knit itself back together, aided by their strange, herbal poultices and a rough, bone-setting technique that made me grit my teeth. The huntresses observed me constantly. The leader, a silent, imposing presence. The scout, always assessing, testing. The powerful woman with the axe, her gaze filled with suspicion. The hooded one, watching from the shadows. They were Anya, the leader, I eventually learned. Her scaled skin was the mark of the alpha, the most adapted. Lyra, the scout, agile and sharp, with those piercing jade eyes. Zora, the warrior with the axe, grim and powerful. And, the hooded one, a silent, watchful presence, her movements so subtle she was like a part of the shadows themselves. They didn't speak much. Their communication was often nonverbal, a glance, a gesture, a subtle shift in posture. It was a language of instinct, of primal understanding. I, the man of algorithms and data, was forced to shed my reliance on words, on logic, and learn to feel their meaning. They taught me about the desert, not through lectures, but through brutal demonstration. Lyra would leave me small, empty water skins, forcing me to find the hidden condensation points in the cave. Zora would make me carry heavy loads of scavenged metal, pushing my limits until my muscles screamed. Anya would sit and watch, her amber eyes unblinking, assessing my every failure, my every success. Weakness dies, Anya commanded one cycle. Her voice a low rumble. Strength lives. You must choose. My survival instincts, dormant in my comfortable Stardrifter life, ignited with a furious, primal intensity. I learned to read the subtle shifts in the cave's air currents, to identify the different bioluminescent fungi, to distinguish the sounds of their native fauna. My dependence on them was absolute. They were my captors, my saviors, my masters. And the attraction, it was undeniable. Not a gentle pull, but a raw, dangerous magnetic force. It stemmed not from their conventional beauty, but from their sheer competence, their unyielding will to survive, their intimate, almost spiritual connection to this brutal land. Their wildness was intoxicating. Their strength was a challenge, a promise of something primal and untamed. I, the refined urbanite, was being stripped down to my core, and in that raw state, their savage power was terrifying, irresistible. Their mercy came with a clear price, absolute submission to their ways. Their care was a form of control, a brutal education. My existence now depended on navigating their fierce, unpredictable world, learning their tribal power dynamics, and adapting to a savage truth. I was now part of their hunt. Whether as prey or as a tool remained to be seen. But the primal allure of their strength had already claimed a part of me, forever marking me as their own. ##### The Sand Huntresses, Part 2. The Brutal School. The den became my school, the desert my unforgiving teacher. My body, once a fragile vessel of comfort, was now a tool, honed by deprivation and exertion. The atrophy faded, replaced by lean, aching muscle. My augmented leg, still stiff but functional, became an extension of my will, adapting to the uneven terrain of the caves. The huntresses continued their relentless instruction. They didn't coddle. They didn't explain. They demonstrated. And I learned. Or I suffered. Anya, the leader, rarely participated in the direct training, but her presence was a constant. Her amber eyes, shielded by those flickering nictitating membranes, missed nothing. She was the strategist, the decision-maker, her authority absolute, earned through a lifetime of brutal survival. Her strength was not just physical, but an iron will that bent the environment to her tribe's needs. I watched her, fascinated, appalled, drawn by her chilling competence. Lyra, the scout, became my primary tormentor, disguised as my instructor. She moved like a whisper across the sand, able to vanish into the shimmering heat haze, then reappear from nowhere. She taught me to track, to read the subtle shifts in the dunes, the faint scent of a desert creature, the almost invisible passage of wind currents. She'd take me out of the den, to the fringes of the canyon, and leave me. "Find your way back, Sky Dweller," she'd command, her jade eyes glinting with a challenge. "Or die with the sun." And I'd fight, stumbling, crawling, relying on my failing internal compass and the desperate urge to prove I wasn't entirely useless. Her methods were brutal, but effective. My reliance on her acute senses, on her uncanny ability to navigate this hell's cape, became absolute. Zora, the warrior, was blunt force. She introduced me to their weapons: the barbed spear, the heavy bludgeon, the curved bone knife. Her lessons were short, painful, and direct. "Move like the sand. Strike like the viper," she'd growl, slamming her practiced spear into a makeshift target of woven hides. Her strength was immense, terrifying. She seemed to revel in the visceral act of combat, her gray eyes alight with a primal hunger. She watched me with a constant suspicion, never quite trusting the Sky Dweller. Her raw power, however, was undeniable, and a dangerous attraction grew within me, the allure of pure, untamed force. Sorry, the hooded one, remained largely in the shadows, a silent observer. I rarely saw her face clearly. She communicated primarily through subtle gestures, guiding me towards a hidden cache of tools or pointing out a dangerous crack in the cave wall. Her movements were unervingly silent, almost supernatural. She was the group's stealth expert, their unseen guardian. Her unreadable nature, her quiet competence, held a mysterious appeal, an enigma I found myself drawn to unravel. My background, my knowledge of technology, seemed utterly useless here. My comms were dead, my data pads fried, my ship a ruin. But they quickly assessed my innate value. When a primitive water filtration system in the den, a series of porous rocks and woven filters, began to fail, I instinctively recognized the issue. A molecular imbalance, clogging the membranes. I didn't have my tools, but using a scavenged bone shard and a piece of discarded metallic plating, I improvised a crude yet effective purification method utilizing residual static charges in the rock. Anya watched me, her amber eyes unblinking, as the water, once cloudy, ran clear. "You understand machines," she stated, her voice a low, analytical hum. Not a question, but a cold assessment. "I can fix them," I rasped, my throat still dry despite the sips of water. "I built them. I know how they work." Anya turned to Zora. "He is useful." Zora grunted, a grudging acknowledgement. My status, once that of a helpless captive, began to shift. I was no longer merely a burden, a specimen. I was a tool, a valuable one. My knowledge, once the source of my arrogance, was now the fragile tether that bound me to life in this brutal world. One cycle, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the dunes in shades of blood and shadow, Anya brought me to a secluded alcove. A map, etched into the cave wall, depicted the region around the Denver. It showed jagged canyons, sprawling dune seas, and ominous red areas marked with crude symbols. Our hunting grounds, she rumbled, her finger tracing a path across the map. In the lands of the Razorbacks. She pointed to a symbol, a jagged, clawed mark. They're a rival tribe. They take. They kill. They're not like us. No mercy. No purpose. Her voice was laced with a deep, chilling hatred. She then pointed to another symbol, a serpentine coil. The sand serpents. They burrow deep. They hunt by sound. They can swallow a beast whole. Her eyes held a flicker of something close to fear, or perhaps, respect for a truly lethal predator. Our resources dwindle, she continued, her gaze piercing. The water flows less. The game runs thin. We must hunt deeper. Risk more. Your sky metal, it holds much. But it is claimed by the sand and the scavengers. She was telling me about their threats, their vulnerabilities. Her pragmatism was absolute. She wasn't asking for help. She was stating a reality and my role in it. The dangerous attraction to these women intensified. Their ferocity, their unwavering will to survive against such overwhelming odds, was a powerful, almost erotic draw. Their bodies, etched by the elements, were living testaments to their strength. Their minds, sharp and pragmatic, were honed by constant danger. I was a reliant protege, bound by necessity, but also drawn by a raw, undeniable admiration. My forced adaptation had begun to feel like an inevitable, almost exhilarating transformation. I was shedding my old self, embracing the primal. And the care they offered, a strange blend of brutal pragmatism and grudging protection, was a form of control I now accepted, almost welcomed. My existence, however precarious, was now inextricably linked to their fierce, unpredictable world. ###The Sand Huntresses. Part 3. Shifting Sands, Shifting Status. My transformation was rapid, brutal, and utterly complete. The desert had stripped away my arrogance, my reliance on technology, my very definition of civilized. What remained was Kalen, the survivor, honed by hunger, thirst, and the relentless training of the Sand Huntresses. My augmented leg, once a hindrance, was now indistinguishable from my own flesh, moving with fluid, efficient power. My skin, once pale, was now tanned and tough, etched by wind and sun. I could read the dunes, tell time by the shifting shadows of the spires, taste the approaching sandstorm in the air. I learned to hunt small, burrowing creatures with a makeshift spear, to find hidden condensation points in the scorching rock. My senses, once dulled by urban life, had sharpened to an almost animalistic degree. The primal allure of their strength wasn't just an observation anymore. It was an internal echo. I was becoming something closer to them. My status within the tribe had subtly shifted. I was no longer a mere captive. I was a skykin, an outsider, but one deemed useful. My understanding of machines, of scavenged tech, proved invaluable. I jury-rigged a more efficient solar array for their den, scavenged parts from my wrecked ship, turning defunct comms units into rudimentary sensors that could detect approaching threats. This, more than any physical feat, earned me a grudging respect. Anya, the leader, would seek me out, not for pleasantries, but for strategic discussions. The moisture traps of the northern waste are failing, she'd state, her amber eyes unblinking. The Razorbacks have pushed into the red canyons. We need a new source. Can your sky metal find us a path through the sand eaters' nests? Her questions were direct, pragmatic, always focused on survival. Lyra, the scout, still tested me relentlessly, but her jade eyes held a hint of something new, a challenge, a respect for my adaptability. We would spend cycles tracking elusive desert creatures, her silent signals, my newfound instincts, a brutal dance of hunter and prey. There was a dangerous intimacy in these shared hunts, a wordless communication born of shared purpose and extreme peril. The raw power she exuded, her fierce self-sufficiency, was an intoxicating draw. Zora, the warrior, remained suspicious, but her hostility had lessened. She still called me Skykin, never Kalen, but she accepted my presence on hunts, even sometimes deferring to my quick thinking in tight spots. When a monstrous sandworm burst from beneath a dune, threatening to swallow Lyra whole. It was my quick analysis of its vibration patterns, my shouted warning that allowed Lyra to escape. Zora's grunt of approval was worth more than any medal. Her primal strength, once terrifying, was now a source of admiration, a raw, almost magnetic force. Sorry, the silent one, was the most enigmatic. She rarely spoke, but her amber eyes, sometimes flickering with an almost golden light, would watch me. She moved with an unnerving grace, a shadow among shadows. One cycle, lost and disoriented during a sandstorm, it was Sari who materialized beside me, her hand alight, reassuring weight on my arm, guiding me back to the safety of the Denver. Her presence was a silent promise of protection, a subtle acknowledgement of a shared, unspoken bond. Her quiet competence, her deep connection to the land, was a captivating mystery I felt compelled to solve. The tribe's life was a cycle of survival: hunt, gather, fortify, protect. Their justice was swift and unforgiving. Trespassers, raiders, scavengers from other broken tribes were dealt with brutally, often with a primal ritual that involved a swift, clean kill and a reverence for the life taken. There was no mercy for the weak, only efficiency for the strong. This brutal reality, once shocking, now felt like a natural law of the desert. I learned of their beliefs. The desert was a living entity, both provider and devourer. The sun was the great eye, watching. The wind was the breath stealer. Their ancestors spoke to them through the shifting sands, guiding their hunts. It was a primal, animistic worldview, utterly alien to my scientific mind, yet powerfully resonant in this unforgiving landscape. My relationships with the Huntresses were complex. There was no sentimentality, no overt affection, only a pragmatic assessment of worth, a grudging respect forged in the crucible of survival. Yet, beneath the surface, a dangerous trust was forming. Lyra's sharp glances, Zora's grunting acceptance, Sari's silent guidance, Anya's direct commands, they were threads weaving me into their unforgiving tapestry. But I was still an outsider. I still held a piece of my old self, a flicker of memory of a softer world. This created a tension, a dangerous edge to my existence. Their care was conditional, tied to my usefulness. Their mercy was a fleeting concept. My growing attraction to their raw power, to their fierce independence, was balanced by the chilling understanding that I was still their possession. The resources, as Anya had warned, were indeed dwindling. The small, hidden oases they relied upon were drying up. The migratory patterns of the desert beasts were changing, pushing them into dangerous territories. The Razorbacks, a brutal, male-dominated tribe from the scorched lands, were growing bolder, their raids encroaching on the Sand Huntresses' territory. The desert, unforgiving as ever, was tightening its grip. Anya called a council. The light in the main chamber of the den was low, casting long, dancing shadows. The faces of the Huntresses, grim and determined, gathered around her. I stood at the periphery, an observer, yet acutely aware that my fate, too, would be decided here. The long thirst approaches, Anya stated, her voice a low, heavy rumble that filled the chamber. The water from the serpent's well is tainted. The beasts migrate south, into the Razorback hunting grounds. We must seek the Skyfall Oasis. A collective murmur went through the Huntresses. The Skyfall Oasis was a legend, a mythical source of pure water, supposedly located beyond the most treacherous dunes, guarded by ancient, territorial creatures and far within Razorback lands. It was a desperate gamble. We go, Anya declared, her amber eyes burning with an unyielding resolve. We take what is ours. The desert demands it. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. Skykin, your knowledge of sky metal, your eye for the unseen ways. You come with us. This is your trial. You're proving. My heart hammered, a mix of primal fear and exhilarating anticipation. This was it. The ultimate test. My chance to prove my worth, to solidify my place, to fully embrace this brutal world. Or to die trying. The shifting sands had brought me to this precipice. And the dangerous attraction to these fierce, wild women, my saviors and my potential masters, had pulled me deeper into their savage, unpredictable world. The climax, a desperate fight for survival against the harsh environment and rival tribes, was upon us. #### The Sand Huntresses, Part 4, The Long Thirst and the Razorbacks. The journey to the Skyfall Oasis was a living hell. The sun beat down with unrelenting fury, pushing the mercury past the breaking point. The sand, a shimmering, endless expanse, stretched in every direction, dotted only by skeletal remains of ancient structures and the occasional, ominous silhouette of a colossal dune. The air tasted of dust and desperation. My internal monologue, stripped of all pretense, was a raw chant of survival. Breathe. Move. Endure. We moved at night, when the desert held a deceptive coolness, illuminated by a sliver of a crescent moon and the faint, ghostly glow of distant nebulae. By day, we buried ourselves in the sand, using emergency heat shields and my jury-rigged solar stills to reclaim precious, life-giving drops of water. Every sip was a victory, every step a defiance. Anya led, her figure a tireless beacon of endurance. Lyra, the scout, ranged ahead, a silent phantom, reading the subtle shifts in the sand that warned of treacherous sinkholes or the presence of burrowing creatures. Zora, the warrior, brought up the rear, her axe ready, her gray eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit or ambush. Sari, ever watchful, moved at the periphery, her presence a silent, reassuring shadow, her senses keenly attuned to the whispers of the wind. My role was crucial. My understanding of navigation, of reading salvage maps, a forgotten skill from my old life, combined with my newly honed instincts for the desert, helped us plot the fastest, safest course. My crude sensors, scavenged from my ship's long-range comms, could detect subtle energy signatures, alerting us to hidden pockets of moisture or the presence of rival tribes before they saw us. The sand huntresses, usually so stoic, showed signs of strain. Their movements were still efficient, but their faces, etched by sun and wind, now bore lines of fatigue. Their subtle alien features, the enhanced nictitating membranes, the iridescent skin, were pushed to their limits, shimmering with heat. Yet, their resolve never wavered. Their primal strength, their fierce dedication to survival, was a force of nature. And it pulled me in, deeper and deeper, into their world, into their fierce, wild beauty. The dangerous attraction intensified, not just to their physical prowess, but to their unwavering spirit. One arid morning, huddled beneath an overhang of a ruined cliff face, Lyra returned from her scout. Her jade eyes were grim. "Razorbacks," she whispered, her voice a low growl. "A war party. Moving south. Too many. They track us." Anya's jaw tightened. "How close?" "Too close," Lyra confirmed. "They smell our desperation. They want the oasis. They want us." My heart hammered. The Razorbacks. Known for their brutality, their merciless tactics. They embodied everything savage and predatory in this wasteland. And now, they were hunting us. "We cannot outrun them," Zora rumbled, her hand instinctively going to her axe. "We fight." "No," Anya commanded, her voice firm. "Not here. Not yet. Their numbers are too great. We lead them into the Whispering Sands. The Whispering Sands. A notoriously treacherous stretch of dunes known for its unstable ground, its sudden, violent sand devils, and its colossal, territorial sandworms. It was a death trap, but it was our only chance. My internal monologue screamed in protest. Suicide. This is suicide. But then, a calm clarity settled over me. There was no other choice. Only survival. Only the fight. We moved with renewed urgency, pushing our exhausted bodies past their limits, racing towards the Whispering Sands. The sun, a burning eye in the sky, was rising, and the Razorbacks were gaining. We heard them before we saw them. The guttural war cries, the thrumming of their crude vehicles, the pounding of their sand runners' hoofs. They were a force of brutal, masculine aggression, a stark contrast to the sand huntresses' primal, adaptive strength. "They come," Zora roared, her voice laced with a savage glee. She was ready, always ready. As we reached the edge of the Whispering Sands, Anya turned to me. Her amber eyes held a grim resolve. "Skykin, your knowledge of the ground, your warnings. We rely on them. Do not fail us." It wasn't a plea. It was a command, a trust, a dangerous, exhilarating burden. I nodded, my breath ragged. "I won't." We plunged into the treacherous dunes. The sand here was finer, looser, prone to sudden shifts. Giant, circular depressions, the telltale signs of burrowing sandworms, pockmarked the landscape. The wind howled, whipping up miniature sand devils that danced across the dunes like malevolent spirits. "Left," I yelled, my voice raw, pointing to a shimmering patch of quicksand that Lyra was about to step into. Her jade eyes flickered to mine, a sharp nod of acknowledgement as she veered sharply. Razorback's close. Sari's low hiss came from the rear, her eyes scanning the pursuing figures now visible through the dust. The battle began on the move. Razorback scouts, swift and relentless, darted ahead, their crude energy weapons spitting fire. The Sand Huntresses responded with chilling efficiency. Zora, a whirlwind of furious power, met the first charge, her axe a blur, cleaving through armor and flesh with brutal precision. Lyra, agile and deadly, used her spear like a dancer, deflecting incoming fire, then thrusting with lethal accuracy. Anya, calm amidst the chaos, directed their movements, her own blade flashing, dispatching foes with grim efficiency. I fought alongside them, a desperate ally. My augmented leg, still stiff but now infused with adrenaline, allowed me to move with unexpected speed. I used my knowledge of the unstable ground to my advantage, luring razorbacks into hidden sinkholes, causing minor sandslines to disorient them. My scavenged knife, crudely sharpened, became an extension of my primal will to survive, to protect the very women who had claimed me. A razorback warrior, massive and brutal, lunged at me, his crude bludgeon swinging. I ducked, feeling the wind of his blow, and twisted, driving my knife deep into his exposed flank. He roared, a guttural sound of rage and pain, and crumpled. The act was visceral, terrifying, but also empowering. I had killed. I had survived. The fighting was desperate, brutal. Sand filled my eyes, my mouth. The heat was suffocating. But I pushed through, my instincts screaming, my will unbreakable. I was not a civilized man anymore. I was a part of this savage world, a defender of this fierce tribe. My attraction to their raw power, to their unyielding resilience, had deepened into a fierce loyalty, a primal bond forged in blood and sand. Just as the razorback numbers seemed overwhelming, a terrifying roar ripped through the ground beneath us. A colossal sandworm, drawn by the vibrations of the battle, erupted from the sand, its tooth-filled maw wide enough to swallow a tank. The razorbacks, caught off guard, screamed in terror as the beast devoured their ranks whole. "Move!" Anya roared, her voice strained, but powerful. Now, the ground was shaking violently. More worms were coming. This was the climax. The brutal realities of Xylos 4, the relentless desert, its monstrous inhabitants, and the savage power dynamics of rival tribes, all converged into a single, desperate fight for survival. My allegiance, my very existence, was inextricably bound to these women. And for the first time, the brutal realities of this world felt right. This was my proving. This was my place. ####The Sand Huntresses, Part 5, The Proving and the Oasis. The ground trembled beneath us, a living thing, as the colossal sandworms boiled to the surface, drawn by the cacophony of battle and the thrum of razorback vehicles. Dust, sand, and the screams of dying men filled the air. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was a massacre, a brutal, indiscriminate culling by the desert itself. My internal monologue, a raw, primal scream, was simply survive. With them, Anya, Lyra, Zora, Sari, they moved with an almost supernatural precision amidst the chaos, their bodies blurring as they danced between eruptions of sand and the snapping jaws of the colossal worms. They were an extension of the desert, adapting, flowing, surviving. I, Kalen, the former tech jockey, found myself mirroring their movements, my instincts screaming faster than my thoughts. My augmented leg, usually a point of vulnerability, moved with fluid power, carrying me over shifting dunes, dodging falling debris. To the east, the ridge, Anya's voice, hoarse but commanding, cut through the din. The worms cannot climb it. Go. We scrambled, a desperate surge towards a jagged, rocky ridge that rose abruptly from the flat expanse of the whispering sands. Razorback survivors, equally terrified, were already swarming it, desperate to escape the monstrous maw below. The fight was no longer between tribes. It was a brutal, Darwinian scramble for the last sliver of solid ground. Zora roared, a primal, defiant sound, as a razorback warrior, His face contorted with desperation, tried to push Lyra off the ridge. Zora's axe, a blur of gleaming metal, struck true, sending the warrior plummeting into the churning sands below, swallowed instantly by a newly emerged worm. Her loyalty was absolute, her ferocity unwavering. Lyra, her jade eyes wide with adrenaline, pointed. More razorbacks. They cut off our path to the summit. We were trapped on a narrow ledge, between the devouring worms below and a desperate horde of razorbacks above. The air crackled with tension, thick with the scent of fear, blood, and hot sand. Skykin, Anya's voice snapped. Your senses. Can you find a path? A weakness in their line. My mind, working at hyperspeed, scanned the chaotic scene. The razorbacks were clustered, pushing forward blindly, their desperation making them predictable. Their focus was on the summit. The worms were focusing on the sounds, the vibrations. The west flank, I yelled, my voice raw, pointing to a crumbling section of the ridge. It's unstable. If we draw their main force there, the ground will give. The worms will take them. It was a desperate gamble, a calculated act of environmental manipulation. Anya's amber eyes, piercing and sharp, met mine. A moment of intense, unspoken communication passed between us. Trust. Dangerous, absolute trust forged in the crucible of impending death. Zora. Lyra. Sorry. With me. Anya barked, and without a moment's hesitation, they shifted, turning their fury towards the designated flank. I was no longer giving orders. I was a part of the command structure, my instincts fused with their strategy. We charged, a compact, lethal unit, striking at the Razorback's exposed flank. Zora was a battering ram, clearing a path with her axe. Lyra danced through the chaos, her spear striking with surgical precision. Sorry, a silent blur, took down targets from behind, her bone knife a whisper of death. Anya, a whirlwind of controlled ferocity, fought like a demon, her scaled skin shimmering with sweat and effort. I fought with them, my body moving on pure instinct. My improvised knife flashed, finding exposed joints, weak points in armor. I used my knowledge of the shifting sand, dodging blows, luring razorbacks into soft spots, then stepping aside as the ground swallowed them whole. My augmented leg, a marvel of biomechanics, allowed me to pivot with impossible speed to launch myself into the fray, a primal surge of power. The fighting was visceral, brutal, a blur of sound and motion. I was no longer Kalen the hacker. I was a hunter, a survivor, a part of this savage, beautiful tribe. The line between prey and predator had blurred, then vanished entirely. I was simply a live dash, fighting for my existence alongside these fierce, extraordinary women. Then, the ground beneath the Razorback's main force groaned. A deep, guttural tremor. The ridge, weakened by their desperate charge and my earlier tactical insights, began to crumble. Fall back, Anya roared, pulling us away from the collapsing section. The Razorbacks, trapped, screamed in terror as the ridge gave way. Tons of rock and sand cascaded downwards, straight into the maw of a waiting sandworm. The desert had claimed its due. The battle ended not with a victory, but with an act of nature, guided by our cunning. Exhausted, battered, but alive, we stood on the remaining, stable part of the ridge, watching the dust settle, listening to the fading roars of the worms. Our clothes were torn, our bodies bruised, but our spirit was unbroken. You led them to their doom, Zora grunted, her face streaked with grime and blood, but her gray eyes held a flicker of something new, not just grudging respect, but a nascent admiration. The desert made the choice. I replied, my voice hoarse. I just showed it where to bite. Anya turned to me, her amber eyes, usually so stoic, held a flicker of intense emotion. Pride? Acceptance? It was impossible to tell, yet it was undeniably powerful. You are truly Skykin, Kalen, she rumbled, her voice softer, yet still carrying the weight of command. You see the unseen. You fight with the land. Lyra offered a rare, genuine smile, a quick flash of teeth in her sun-darkened face. Sorry, standing a little closer than usual, gave a subtle nod. The immediate threat was gone, but the long thirst remained. We had to find the oasis. We pressed on, pushing past exhaustion, driven by the desperate hope of pure water. Days later, broken but defiant, we found it. Nestled deep within a hidden canyon, shrouded by ancient, wind-sculpted rock formations, lay a shimmering expanse of impossible blue. The Skyfall Oasis. A true miracle in this desolate world. The water was crystalline, cool, pure. Ancient, gnarled trees, their leaves a deep, impossible green, clung to the rocky walls, their roots drawing sustenance from the hidden depths. We drank, deeply, reverently, feeling the life flow back into our desiccated bodies. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of water and the sighs of relief. My trials were over. I had proven my worth. I had fought, bled, and survived alongside the Sand Huntresses. My status had solidified. I was Skykin, a valued member of the tribe, an integral part of their survival. Anya approached me as I sat by the water's edge, watching the setting sun paint the canyon walls in hues of gold and rose. "You have faced the desert, Kalen," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You have fought our enemies. You have given us new life." She extended a hand. In it, she held a small, intricately carved bone pendant, strung on a leather thong. It was a crude symbol of the desert's shifting dunes, but etched with a subtle marking that resembled my ship's symbol. "You are one of us now," she stated, her amber eyes holding mine, fierce and unyielding, yet filled with a profound acceptance. "If you choose." My heart hammered. The choice. Return to my old life, haunted by the memories of this savage world? Or fully embrace their way of life, become one of them, a true outsider woven into their ancient tapestry? My mind reeled with the implications. The brutality, the constant struggle, the shedding of all I once was. But then, I looked at them. Lyra, laughing softly as she splashed water on Zora. Sari, a silent, graceful shadow moving among the trees. Anya, strong, commanding, her gaze holding the wisdom of the ages. Their fierce, wild beauty. Their raw, untamed strength. The intoxicating allure of their self-sufficiency. This was a brutal reality, yes. But it was real Dash. And I, Kalen, the man who had almost died in the sand, felt more alive here, more profoundly, myself Dash, than I ever had before. I took the pendant, its bone cool against my palm. "I choose," I said, my voice rough, but firm. "I choose the sand." Anya nodded, a rare, faint smile touching her lips. "Then welcome, Skykin. The desert claims its own." The episode concluded. I was no longer a lone human, a survivor. I was a part of the Sand Huntresses, a chosen member of their tribe, forever marked by the sun, the sand, and the wild, primal lessons they taught me. My journey explored the brutal realities of survival, my forced adaptation to their savage world, and the developing, dangerous attraction to these women who were simultaneously my saviors, my masters. In the embodiment of a primal strength I found both terrifying and irresistible. My mercy had come with a price, their care, a form of control, and my very existence now depended on navigating their fierce, unpredictable world. But in that world, I had found a savage freedom, a visceral purpose. And the lingering wildness of the desert and of the women who mastered it had forever claimed my soul.